Nioh 2 is a fantastic Souls-like. It is very, very challenging, very, very fun, with many fantastic boss fights, fantastic enemies, fantastic areas to go through, a very interesting story, and it's all around just a really great game. But specifically, I want to talk about the boss fights. I want to do a boss ranking. I want to rank all the bosses from worst to best. So, let's get to it. And at number 24 is Gyuki, the worst boss in Nioh 2. This boss is just kind of bullshit. He does way too much damage with all his slam attacks, and it's really hard to like attack him where you need to. He moves around way too much. The camera sometimes is positioned in like the worst possible spots. And all around, I have nothing positive to say about this boss fight, which I at least got one positive thing to say about every fight in this game except this one. And at number 23 is Lady Osakabe. Now, this is very annoying fight. You got these furry tentacles that you gotta beat down, and once you beat down 4 of them, the big one comes down, and you smack that one, and you gotta do this about 3 times, and it's annoying because when you're attacking one, you can't see the other ones throwing projectiles at you around, and it's overall quite an unfair fight. The one reason I think this is not the worst boss is simply put, there's a lot of really cool spectacle to this fight. Like, it just looks really cool, and yeah, it just looks awesome. That's the one thing making it not the worst boss. And at number 22, we have Saito Yoshitatsu. Now, the thing I don't like about Saito Yoshitatsu is a lot of his attacks and like his normal phase are okay, they're fine. But like once he enters the Dark Realm, which is like a special version, a special thing that bosses can do, they enter like a more hard version, a more hard phase, then this boss kind of becomes bullshit. His normal phase is alright, you got some cool attacks, some knee, it's overall kind of easy. But then he transforms, and the two, from what I understand, the yokai form you didn't choose at the beginning, he can turn into the other two yokai forms. So as you can see, like the Phantom and the other one. And the Phantom, I just have no clue how to get past. Anytime you try to get near him, he has his range attacks that keep you at bay. But if you just stay back, it'll never hit you. And so it's just a waiting game, basically. You just gotta wait it out. And the other one is just way too aggressive and up your face. And it's really hard to deal with. And this is just a very weirdly balanced fight that I think was really terribly handled. And at number 21, we have Saiko Magoyoshi, or at least that's how I think you pronounce it. Now, this is just a very easy and forgettable fight. Like, it was just over so quick with so little threat that I was just mostly pretty forgettable. He has some cool gun attacks, and he sometimes flies in the air and stuff, but overall, it's just over really quickly, and it's quite forgettable. And at number 20, we have Daidara Bochi. Now, the thing with Daidara Bochi is that he is kind of bullshit, just like Gyuki, where he's this giant boss that does way too much damage with his attacks. And a lot of his attacks are also really annoying. But I, for some reason, find it to be kind of fun to smack away at his fingers and try to take him out. And then the fight also has some really cool spectacle in it. And once you defeat all of his fingers, then you can climb up and do like an attack that takes away almost all his health. And you gotta do this like 3 times. And overall, it's just a memorable fight. It is kind of bullshit, and it isn't that fun, but it's just memorable. And number 19 is William. Now, William is actually the protagonist of the first game, which, because in the first game you didn't have a customizable character, while this time you do. And I didn't really much care for the first Nioh, but fighting the protagonist from the first game is pretty cool. Sadly, it is probably the easiest fight in the game, but he does have some pretty cool attacks, and it is still quite a memorable moment in the game, so it sticks out a little bit more than the previous fights. And overall, I'd say it's a okay, mediocre kind of fight. But now we get to the pretty good fights, and at number 18 is Imagawa Yoshimoto. Now, while this isn't, like, say, a great fight or, like, super memorable, he has some pretty cool attacks, and is overall, I'd say, a slightly decent challenge. And I just remember this being a pretty fun fight. He's got many burstable counters, many different yokai attacks, and it's overall just a pretty good time fighting him. And so, this is a good spot to put him. And at number 17 is Maeda Toshiya. Now, what I really like about Maeda Toshiya is he's got a lot of different, like, fun attacks. He's very challenging, very aggressive, and it's always just a very fun fight. It's nothing too special, but I think it is quite a good, solid fight. And at number 16, Hachisuka Karoku is a very fun fight. He's got many like pretty crazy attacks and is overall a decent challenge. I never really died that much to him or thought he was ever like super challenging, but he is still a pretty fun fight. He's got a couple of yokai attacks and just overall is a solid fight. Overall, a lot of the bosses that I'm going to be talking about now are just solidly good fights that aren't too challenging or too incredible, but are still good. And in the middle of the list, at number 15, we have Tokichiro's first fight. Now, it seems like the challenge of this fight really depends on if you give him enough time to buff. Because if he buffs, you'll get a lot of defense and a lot of damage on him and just be way stronger. But if you're able to run to him quickly enough at the beginning of battle and hit him before he buffs, then it becomes a pretty easy fight. But overall, he has some cool electricity attacks and it's just a really memorable fight. It's solidly fun and not too incredibly challenging. He's very important in the story, and this is a very good moment in the story. But as a fight itself, it's quite solid, pretty fun, but nothing like too overly special. And at number 14 is Kashin Koji. Now, this is a boss that I just really didn't know what I thought of him. He's got magical attacks that are pretty easy to avoid, but also kind of fun. There's a lot of them, and they're pretty cool, but like I said, they're easy to avoid. But then he's got like melee attacks that are just super deadly, and like you have to play somewhat passively and stay kind of away from him because what if he starts chaining an attack out of them, he can really destroy you in like seconds. Then he's got like this cloning attack that sends out multiple of him, and it's just crazy to like deal with. And overall, there's things I really like about this fight that I found really fun. But then like the amount of damage his melee attacks can do, and that cloning attack being kind of like if you're able to deal with it real quickly, then it's not a problem. But if you don't, then it's complete menace. It's just it kind of drags this fight down, and I feel like this is a good spot to put him. I still find him to be a pretty fun fight. Not pretty fun, really fun. And at number 13, we start getting to some of the really, really great, fun boss fights. And at number 13, like I said, we got Mizuki, the first boss of the game. And it's a pretty challenging, not pretty challenging, very challenging fight for how early it is in the game, just after like the first level. Mizuki really just kicked my ass like the first time I fought him, and it took me quite a couple of tries before I finally defeated him. He's got many swing attacks that while now are easy to dodge, for a beginning player they aren't. He doesn't have too much health, but it does feel like quite a lot of health. And he introduces you to burst counters, grab attacks, and like the dark like mode or whatever, and he just really teaches you everything you need to know for bosses like at the beginning of the game. Very fun fight, very great fight, but compared to some of the bosses that come later, he is quite simple. And at number 12 is Enenra, the second boss of the game. I think Enenra becomes a little bit more complex than Mizuki, adding in a lot of more like moves and burst counters and such. He's got pillars around the arena that like if he like hits them with an attack, they'll splash water on him, that'll do like damage and stuff because he's a fire boss. You can also like use some elemental weaknesses against him, and there's just a lot that's really great about this fight. It's a super fun fight for the beginning of the game. Like some of the later fights, it feels a little slow. Like I like bosses that are a little bit more aggressive and fast, and Enenra just feels a little bit more slow and passive and not really at that high peak that some of the bosses later on get to. But still, I do think this is a really amazing boss because now we are in the territory of incredible boss fights with 11 more bosses to go that only get better from here. And capping off the first video of my Nioh 2 boss ranking, we have at number 11, Tatarimoke. Now, what I really like about this fight is it's just really fun. It's really challenging, really fun, aggressive, quick, many different attacks that are pretty challenging to dodge. Some attacks aren't too hard to dodge, but some of the other ones are quite challenging to dodge. it's overall a really fun and challenging fight. Now, and fighting an owl is really cool. But why doesn't this boss higher like it should be? Well, when it enters the Dark Realm, unlike other bosses, where it's just harder, more aggressive, and more fun, Tatarimoke has like this orb shooting projectiles that you gotta destroy while the boss is also still trying to kill you. And this is just really weird, and it's not really that. I don't think it's a good idea. I think this kind of drags the boss down, but still, it doesn't completely ruin the boss. I still think this is one of the best bosses out of the game, but this weird mechanic kind of keeps the boss from getting into the amazing top 10. Thank you for watching the first part of my Nioh 2 boss ranking, and I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.